An entire beach resort off limits to outsiders, mysterious military outposts on an artificial island, drone test sites in the desert, deadly bioweapon islands, and underground fortresses. These are places you'll never be allowed to visit. North Korea spent years hyping up the Wonsan Kalma beach resort. When it finally opened back in July, Kim Jong-un called it one of the greatest successes of the year. The place is huge. North Korea says it can hold about 20,000 guests, and for a minute, it looked like they were ready to start cashing in on tourists. Domestic visitors got in first, then a small group of Russians showed up after a trip through Pyongyang. But just as it started gaining attention, the country's tourism website suddenly posted a notice saying the complex is temporarily not receiving foreign tourists. No explanation for why. The timing was interesting though, because Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov had just flown in to meet Kim and tour the place. According to analysts in Seoul, the ban might have been triggered by a Russian newspaper article describing the North Koreans at the resort as not really looking like actual vacationers. It almost looked like they were extras in a movie, placed there supposedly by the government. And knowing North Korea, that wouldn't be very surprising. But the shutdown can't last long. North Korea poured a ton of money into this resort, and apparently without foreign money coming in, they can't even break even. Next up is something the Russian government has never come out and admitted exists, but there's a very good chance that it does. Metro 2. If you've ever ridden the Moscow Metro, you might have been traveling directly above a completely separate, secret subway system that runs much deeper underground. The story goes that Stalin ordered it built as a secure evacuation and command network during wartime, and declassified Soviet archives and construction documents have actually shown evidence of deep tunnels and shafts connected to certain government buildings, so at least parts of this story are real. The layout is said to be 4 separate lines running over 165 feet deep, way deeper than the public metro. These lines supposedly connect the Kremlin, the Federal Security Service headquarters, and other important government buildings. There's too much evidence to dismiss completely, but not enough public information to know for sure how big it is or if it's still operational. It could be running right now though, moving politicians through secret stations while millions of regular people ride the public subway above. Over the past decade, China's been turning tiny reefs in the South China Sea into military outposts, but they didn't just build on pre-existing islands though. They dredged up sand and basically created whole chunks of land. Once the ground was solid, they started building stuff. Long runways, radar domes, helicopter pads, areas that look like missile launch sites. Then in 2016, they revealed a plan for an underwater base more than 10,000 feet down. Nobody really knows what that's about, but it sounds kinda cool. Some people think it might be a distraction from all the other construction above the surface, but that's just speculation. The whole area is being kept secret. Foreign planes get warnings to leave the airspace long before they can get close enough to see what's actually there, so almost everything about these bases is a mystery. There's this long runway sitting out in the Nevada desert, a fenced-off airstrip in what's known as Area 6, not too far from the more infamous Area 51. But what goes on here? Well, a spokesperson from the National Nuclear Security Administration said that both the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security use it, saying they go there to test their own sensors, which doesn't really tell you much. But buried in a big government document back in 2008 was a small note with a much better description of the place, saying, quote, "The purpose of this facility is to construct, operate, and test a variety of unmanned aerial vehicles, airframe modifications, sensor operation, and onboard computer development." So basically, it's a test site for drones. Satellite analysts say the hangars look big enough to hold around 15 MQ-9 Reaper drones, the same kind used overseas. And since the runway is too short for fighter jets, that lines up with what's going on, seemingly. Some have also noticed the terrain around the area looks a lot like parts of Libya, where the US watches militant groups. So if that's true, this place might be where they test those massive camera systems, made of hundreds of tiny lenses, the kind that can track people or vehicles from way up in the air. Kilauea Iki is a crater inside Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. It looks calm from the rim. All the lava's cooled after a huge eruption, in 1959. But the closer you get, it's easy to see why the park keeps people on the trails. The crater floor is officially off limits, mostly because of gas and the ground being unstable. The volcano constantly releases sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, invisible, deadly gases that can knock you out in seconds. On top of that, the crust across the crater floor is thin in places, hiding pockets of heat underneath. So one wrong step and you could break through. Even when the volcano isn't erupting, the crater is very much active. You just can't see it. Trained scientists have gone in, but the public isn't allowed on the most dangerous parts for obvious reasons. There's this massive wetland area on Kenya's coast called the Tana River Delta, and there's a section deep inside that basically nobody gets to see. But not because there's a fence or soldiers everywhere, it's the wildlife itself that keeps people out. There are hundreds of hippos and Nile crocodiles living here, and if you know anything about hippos, they kill more people in Africa than almost any other animal. They're insanely territorial and aggressive. The crocs are just as bad, but the real problem is the terrain. It's full of deep swamps everywhere that'll swallow you up, and because Mount Kenya is way upriver, when it rains up there, flash floods become a real danger. You can be standing somewhere that seems fine, and then suddenly there's just a wall of water rushing at you. So unless you're a scientist with very specific permits and probably a death wish, you're not getting anywhere near this area. Heard Island is in Australian territory, but it might as well be another planet. It is thousands of miles from any continent, sitting out in the Southern Ocean. Right in the middle of it is a volcano called Mawson Peak, and it's active. Australia has made the entire island a strict nature reserve, so it's already off limits, but even if it wasn't restricted, you would not want to go here. Under the ice cap and glaciers, the volcano has created this nightmare maze of lava tubes and caves. These aren't stable ancient caves though, they're constantly changing because the volcano is so lively. Inside these tunnels, you've got volcanic gases building up that'll instantly kill you. The ceilings collapse without warning because the glaciers above are melting from the heat below. And if you get near one of the vents where the heat is coming out, the temperature difference is so extreme you'd basically get steamed alive, so that sounds fun. The few scientists from the Australian Antarctic Division who are allowed near the active areas need very special equipment just to survive. And this one is also genuinely terrifying. Vozrozhdeniya Island used to be in the middle of the Aral Sea, but now it's connected to the mainland because the sea dried up. The Soviets called it Aralsk 7, and starting in 1954, they used it as a testing ground for biological weapons. They were testing anthrax, plague, smallpox, Q fever, tularemia, some of the worst diseases you can think of. And I mean, what could go wrong, right? Well, in the late 80s, when they were shutting the place down, they took huge amounts of anthrax spores, mixed them with some decontamination solution, and buried them in shallow pits. And then they left. When the Aral Sea dried up from all the irrigation projects, this island turned into a peninsula. So now this biological disaster zone is directly connected to the mainland. The US spent millions in the early 2000s helping to clean up the anthrax burial sites, but anthrax isn't even the worst part. There could still be weaponized smallpox in the soil and dust, and it's not regular smallpox. The Soviets were genetically modifying it to resist antibiotics. The contamination is so bad, it's now known as one of the most dangerous restricted areas on the planet. Everyone's heard of Cheyenne Mountain and NORAD, but most people don't understand what's actually there. This is not just, a military base carved into the rock. It's an entire city, sorta, built 2,000 feet inside, designed to survive the apocalypse. The entrance has these blast doors that weigh 25 tons each. Inside there are 15 separate buildings, and they're all sitting on giant springs. That's so if a nuclear bomb goes off, the buildings can absorb the shock. People think NORAD moved to Peterson Air Force Base and the operational stuff did, but the inner core of the mountain is still there. It has its own power plant, its own water supply, and air filtration systems that filter out chemicals and radiation. Only a small rotating crew of maintenance and training personnel ever see the inside. And of course, Russia has its own massive underground fortress too, and it might be way bigger. It's inside Mount Yamantau in the Ural Mountains. There's a closed town nearby called Medjugorje that basically exists just to serve what's inside the mountain. Throughout the 90s, when Russia's economy was falling apart and they couldn't afford to pay their military half the time, US satellites kept watching massive construction projects happening at Yamantau during what was apparently an economic crisis. There are rumors that the complex could be big enough to hold 60,000 people. Some people believe it's connected to the Dead Hand system, which is Russia's automated nuclear retaliation network. Like if Moscow gets wiped out, this system automatically launches counterstrikes. The Russian government won't give a straight answer about what it is. They've said it's a mining site, then they said it's for food storage. Finally, the Ministry of Defense just said they don't inform foreign media about facilities built for national security. I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.